Okay.
Okay, so you began your career in the 60s.
Say again?
You began your career in the 60s.
I began my career in the 60s, I did, yes. It's a long time ago. Am I looking at you or the camera?
No, just us.
Just you. Okay, fine. Okay, fine.
So it was a great era, and you were in a lot of things like Avengers, the same, even the Italian Job.
I was.
What is your recollection of this time, that time?
Well, I had just come into show business, and I was incredibly shy at that time in my life. So I perhaps did not enjoy the 60s as much as many people enjoyed the 60s, which is very sad when I look back now.
That's swinging.
Yeah, I know, I wasn't swinging at all, not at all. Of course, I remember the work I did, because, you know, I did. I was always very stage struck. So, but my first love was actually the theatre. And the best thing for me was, what was amazing was in 1966, after many auditions, I got into the West End musical Funny Girl, starring Barbara Streisand. And as a result of being involved in such a high-profile show, it was in fact the hottest ticket in town at that time in London, so it only lasted 3 months. So after the 3 months when it closed, I was able to get an agent who then got me into the television series, like you said, Saint, The Baron, The Avengers, Randall and Hopkirk, Deceased, many, Space 1999, I can't remember really, but you know, a lot of them.
And we are big fans of the Avengers.
Yes.
How was it to work with, you worked with Linda Thornton?
Linda Thorson. And it's extraordinary, my part was very small in the Avengers. And I was a nurse, and I think I had a short wig or I wore a mask, I mean, very little. But the extraordinary thing is, even though that part was very small, about 2 years ago, I was asked to sign, you know, these cards, what do you call these cards? The
collecting cards?
The collecting cards. Yeah, with how I looked in the Avengers, and it wasn't that attractive. It was extraordinary. I had to sign lots and lots of those cards. But of course, The Saint was the first time I worked with Roger Moore. And I remember that extremely well, because the episode was called To Call a Saint. No, To Kill a Saint, not to call a saint, to kill a saint. And it involved 3 of us in bed together. However, despite it being the swinging 60s, it was actually all very innocent. But it was a great credit for the CV, though. Great credit.
And you worked again with Roger Moore in The Persuaders?
I worked with Roger 4 times. Yes, the second time was The Persuaders. That was amazing, because not only was he starring in it, but he also directed the episode I was in, which was called The Long Goodbye. And I was playing an out-of-work actress. I was driving around a little area in London, St John's Wood, in a funny car like a space rocket. And I was promoting soap. And Roger, his character, wants me to help him rescue the Tony Curtis character. And I want nothing to do with him at all. And then when he's trying to persuade me, he gave me a completely unscripted kiss. He was the director. The show was called The Persuaders, but it was not in the script. And I remember I closed my eyes, I enjoyed that kiss, and then I opened them and I grinned, all of which the director kept in. So I have you know, I loved Roger. And then I worked with him again on the Wild Geese, the original Wild Geese with Richard Harris and Richard Burton, just one day as a croupier. Yeah, it was... yes, yes.
How were the relationships between these big actors all together on the same stage? Was it all right?
Well, again, you know, the relationship between all the actors, you mean? I did a day, again, I was young, I was with mega stars, you know. I remember Susie Burton, Richard's then wife, just sort of floating around looking beautiful. But I just did what I had to do, my part, you know, the croupier. throwing the dice or whatever it was I was doing. Yeah.
We're in the middle of the Bond movies here, of the 70s, where you get the Bond movie, The Spy. So
19, how did I get the part? Yeah. I went to meet Cubby Broccoli at Pinewood Studios, and I told him I didn't want to be killed off. That might have been a mistake, because when you're killed off, you get a better part. But even as a hotel receptionist, you know, I had a dress specially made. I remember flying out to Sardinia. Richard Keel was on the plane with me. But the awful thing was that when I arrived in Sardinia, I got bitten on the head by a mosquito. And my head really got swollen because I was allergic to mosquitoes. And I was terribly embarrassed. And I remember I wasn't needed for filming straight away, and I stayed in my room. And then Cubby Broccoli said, "Where is this woman? Get her out," you know. They gave me an injection which took the swelling down, And then I also remember that one night we filmed on a complex called the Cala de Volpe that was then owned by the Aga Khan. And one night a select few of us were invited out to dinner with them. And we all arrived, and I thought it was all going to be wonderful. And his wife opened the door, dripping in diamonds, and then said she'd had the food, especially flown in from Paris, caviar, champagne, smoked salmon. And then she said, "Oh, but the staff are off tonight, so we'll have to have a picnic." And Roger and Cubby ended up waiting on us all. And it was, you know, really lovely memories, happy times and lovely memories, you know. It was, and it's remarkable, you know, now that it's 40 years ago. Well, that's why we're here, isn't it, to celebrate 40 years? And I must say that being here is really special, and I think it's remarkable that, you know, you've put together this club. You put together this club, and so many years ago, too. And it's, well, I mean, Bond is a legend, and I mean, I'm very lucky to have been associated with 3 British film series that have become cults, film cults, and of course that's Bond, British. I don't know whether you know the Carry On film series, which is comedy. I didn't bring any Carry On pictures. I didn't think the French people would know.
In fact, we do, but
most people do not know. No. And Hammer Horror. Where I had a dual starring role in a Hammer Horror film. So I feel very lucky to, I'm making a future from my past, you know, which is, you know.
Yeah, it's hard to imagine 40 years ago that we are going to talk about that movie 40 years
Exactly. It's totally extraordinary. Yeah, it's amazing.
How did you get involved in your second Bond movie, with the one with Sean Connery, Never Say Never Again?
An audition, 10 o'clock in the morning, in Soho, London. I dressed in a maroon catsuit, very close fitting, you know, I was thinner then, and a sleeveless gold brocade coat over it. And the producer looked at me in horror and said, "What kind of outfit do you call that?" And I said, "A Bond girl outfit." And it got me the job. And I was a lady in the Bahamas, as you know, nicknamed Sexpot. I had to fish. I say Bond from death twice. The first time when he's being chased by the sharks and I fish him out of the water. I took fishing lessons for that, actually. So I would look like I knew what I was doing. And the second time was, of course, when we end up at the hotel and go to bed, and in my room and not in his room. So, and in fact, my girlfriends think that was the highlight of my career, going to bed with Sean. Yeah, but I didn't like the wig and how it looked when I was in bed, you know. But anyway, there we are. I mean, of course, I mean, it's sort of known as the unofficial Bond, isn't it? It's really known as the...
And how did you feel about that? How did you feel? How did it feel on the set?
Well,
the Maverick Bond?
It was actually quite difficult. You know, there was tension. As far as I remember, there was tension. But you know, also, we weren't really looked after. I remember one night, I had no one to have dinner with, and I was wandering around this complex where we were filming. We were filming in the Bahamas, and Barbara Carrera, you know, was a big star then, and she was wandering around doing the same thing. No one to have dinner with, so we ended up eating, having dinner together. But no one sort of looked out for us. And then people think how glamorous it is on location, and well,
especially the Bahamas.
Especially
the Bahamas.
The Bahamas, absolutely. Well, it was wonderful to go to the Bahamas, but it can be quite lonely, really. It can be lonely. But anyway, I mean, as I say, here we are talking about it all these years later. 1983, that was Never Say Never Again. Yes, yes.
And were you intimidated? Sorry. Were you intimidated by Sean Connery? Sorry. No, because we are talking about Never Say Never Again. How was it working with Sean Connery? Did you feel intimidated by him?
Maybe a little bit. The fact is, people always say, who's your favourite Bond? Who did you prefer, Sean or Roger? That is a question over the years that has come up. And of course, most people think of Sean as the definitive Bond, but of course I prefer Roger. And not only did I work with him 4 times, but he's more jokey, he was more fun, he was a wonderful man, and I mean, it's so sad he died. He was just, I mean, I know we've all got to go, but he was special. He really was. He was a lovely. Oh yes, yeah. I mean, I hadn't seen him for years, and then Richard Keel wrote a book, and I went to this book launch, and Roger was going to be there, and I hadn't seen him for ages, and I had the picture of the 2 of us together, just standing together, a publicity shot, not from the film. I've got it with me, but. And I said, oh, Roger, I do feel a bit silly, but would you mind signing it for me? And he wrote, Dear Valerie, how slim I was then, and you still are, love, Roger. I mean, he's charming man, yeah.
Were you the victim of his jokes? Was he known for...
Only the unexpected kiss, which I don't mind being the victim of. That was the only time, really. I mean, it was so unexpected, and again, it was just lovely.
Sorry, I cut you off.
Could you talk about the Hammer movies? Hammer was about the Mummy.
Talk about
the Hammer movies.
Oh, the Hammer.
Because we saw this one.
Oh, Blood from the Mummies 2. Yes. A jinxed movie. Did you know? A jinxed movie, an unlucky movie, a very unlucky movie. I started filming with Peter Cushing, master of horror, playing my father. And it was after one day's filming, one day's shoot, at the end of the shoot, at the end of the day, he heard his beloved wife Helen was desperately ill. He left the picture, and this other actor, a Hammer actor, Andrew Kerr, took over. And I'm sorry, I'm just wondering what's going on over there. What is going on over there? There's all a lot of excitement going on. Anyway, and so that was one disaster. Then a young man in the arts department was killed on his motorbike, which was very strange because in the movie, my fiancé was killed on his motorbike. And then finally, after having hiccups for a week, the director, Seth Holt, he had hiccups for a week, and we used to go to Rush's, watch what we'd done, the work, and think it was funny. And I went in one morning, and they told me that the previous night he'd had a dinner party with his wife, and just as the guests left, he turned to her, and he said, I'm going, and he died of a heart attack. He didn't know that. It was so a very unlucky movie. And it came out as a B feature, but of course over the years it's become a cult. And I remember getting a letter from a man on death row in America, and he said, would I send him a picture of myself as Queen Tara, as it would ease his journey into the next world. It sends shivers down my spine when I think about that.
The final moments.
Yeah.
Right.
thanks to that.
I took whipping lessons for Revenge of the Pink Panther, and yeah, I took whipping lessons. I remember to this day this man's name. I don't remember everything, but the film company sent. I said, well, you know, I don't know how to whip. I was cast as Tanya the Lotus Eater, you know, leather-clad lady who had to wield a whip. And they sent this wonderful, tall, dark, handsome man called Alex Laredo to my house. We took a selection of these whips into the garden, and I was having quite fun, you know, learning how to, you know, do this and do that, and I was enjoying it. I looked up, all the neighbours were looking out of the windows thinking, what's she doing? So, you know, that was...
And how was it to work with Peter Sellers?
Well, now, Peter, it was the last Panther film he did. He was very unwell on that film, and in fact filming got delayed, and so I really he just came, he did his bit and he went. He died 2 years later, so I mean it was amazing. There was this picture of the two of us that went sort of global really, but I didn't really get to know him. He was very much a woman's man, though. He thought every woman he met fell in love with him, like Britt Ekland, Liza Minnelli. I didn't. Well, I didn't really have an opportunity to, but I wouldn't have done anyway.
Today, now we're talking about Bon, we're talking about Peter Sellers, there are more movies. When you do this kind of events, what is the series which is the most talked about? Is it the Bonds? Is it the Carry On?
Bond and Carry On.
Bond and Carry On?
Yes, Bond and Carry On, very much so. You know, I do a talk on cruise ships and in theatres, and I start it with a selection of pictures of how I looked when I was, a montage of how I looked when I was young, and then I go into the little bit of the Bond trailer with this bit saying, I have a message for you. And then ladies and gentlemen, Valerie Leon, and then I say, it doesn't matter whether you have a cameo role or are the leading lady, because you're known the world over as a Bond girl, thanks to the internet, of course, but it's true. It's remarkable. I find it quite extraordinary, and I'm incredibly grateful, incredibly grateful. I mean, you know, even to be here now, 40 years on, talking to you about it, it's quite extraordinary. I find it extraordinary.
Okay, so we'll give a few questions about Bon, because we'll be meeting people on the boat.
Yes.
And instead of asking you about the spy will be twice about the same things, we'll give the question for the people on the boat.
Okay, I might say the same things again.
No.
Oh, you have different questions. You have different questions.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
that's good.
That's good. We're good.
We're done.
Thank you very much.
Okay.